Good morning, everyone. I am delighted to welcome you to our conference on how competition policy can contribute to the European Green Deal. We have an exciting program today, starting with an introduction by Executive Vice President Margrethe Vestager. This will be followed by a keynote address by Executive Vice President Frans Timmermans, and then a series of 4 panels. Panel number 1 will be Our Political Ambition, What Do We Want to Achieve? Panel 2, Innovation, Green Growth, and the Competition Rules. Panel 3 will be what the current antitrust and merger rules deliver and what they don't. And then finally, panel number 4 will be what the current state aid rules deliver and what they don't. At the end of each panel, there will be time to take some questions from the registered participants, and I invite you to use Slido for this. When you write your questions in Slido, please write your name before the question. Thank you. Unfortunately, this will not be possible for those of you who follow our press conference, on the web stream, but please do follow our Twitter feed throughout the day with the hashtags. Finally, the day will end by Olivier Garçon, the DG of DG Competition of the European Commission. He will give us some closing remarks. And now it gives me great pleasure to welcome Margrethe Vestager here with us today. Over to you, Executive Vice President.
Well, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. I am delighted to welcome you to our conference on how competition can contribute to achieving our goals when it comes to Green Deal. I think it's a really exciting program that we have ahead of us, and I'm looking forward to learn a lot. Now I see the program once again, so if I was a bit slow, I now relearn it, but eventually I will get there. We come from all over Europe. It's really impressive. 600 participants in this web conference, and this is from all sides of the debate. Actually, it's also from outside of Europe. And I think this is the amazing part. Delegates from industry, from government, NGOs, academics, of course, and lawyers. As said, 600 are we here today. And I want to give you a warm welcome, every one of you. Because the thing is that this is encouraging, that so many people from different backgrounds are taking part today. Because tackling climate change and protecting our environment, well, that is indeed a team effort if there ever was one. I think we have what it takes to make a difference, to leave our children a world where they can breathe fresh air, where they can drink unpolluted water, where the oceans and the forests are still full of life, and where human activity is not accelerating climate change. But to do that, we need to work together. We need every country in the world to play its part. Europe can lead the way, and we are, but we cannot do it alone. So President Biden's decision to rejoin the Paris Agreement is a transformative moment, not only for the Americans, but also for the world. We also need to call on industry to use its huge capacity for innovation to make our economy greener. And to support the Green Deal, we need a competition policy that allows us to get the most of the innovative drive from industry. Competition policy is by no means the main tool to reach our green goals. There are more direct instruments to make our economy greener, such as environmental regulation, taxation, green investment. But that doesn't excuse us from doing our part. With so much to do, every bit makes a difference. And competition rules already help to make our economy greener. State aid rules, they are encouraging governments to invest in renewable energy. They support member states to pool their investments in important projects of common European interest, like the one we approved last week, where 12 member states will invest nearly 3 billion euros in developing innovative greener batteries. The public support will unlock an additional 9 billion euros of private investment and bring the total investment in this battery project to almost 12 billion euros. There's also been a remarkable fall in the cost of supporting renewable energy since the state aid rules began to require competitive bidding to hand out that money. The cost of supporting solar power has been cut in half, and some offshore wind projects, well, now they happen with no subsidy at all. Our antitrust and merger rules, they help to keep the pressure on businesses to use scarce resources efficiently and to innovate. And as the Green Deal shifts our ambition to a higher gear, well, of course, we need to see if competition policy can do more. Finding the best way forward, well, already some of Europe's national competition authorities, like the authorities in Greece and the Netherlands, they have made really important contributions to this debate. And what we need to do now is to make sure that we have heard from everyone with a stake in this issue. And we want to make sure that the rules are clear throughout Europe. To start that process, we launched a call for contributions in September. And I think we had a fantastic response to that call with 200 contributions from every side of the debate. And today, we want to discuss and debate those different ideas and begin to see how can we find a way forward. We have got an excellent collection of speakers and panelists. And even though the pandemic means that we cannot be in one room, we have found ways to make this an interactive event anyway. Of course, no one has a bigger stake in the green transition than the young generation. So in the coming weeks, we are inviting university students across Europe to share their ideas through our student challenge. Since the start of this mandate, we launched a review of our competition rules to see if they were fit for purpose. And indeed, in a changing world, a world of the twin transitions, the green and the digital one, and growing challenges to fair and open global trade. The idea and suggestions we hear in this process will feed in to the new rules that we are in the process of making. In the weeks to come, we have set out how we plan to update the rules for state aid for energy and the environment, and for regional aids for Europe's less developed regions. Then later this year, we will consult on the options for an updated framework and guidance on horizontal cooperation between companies and vertical supply agreements. And in each case, we also draw on what we have learned here today and the contributions we've had to make sure our proposals are doing what they can to help Europe reach our green goals. Before summer, we'll also publish a report on the learnings of these consultations and all the input to the debate for everyone to see and learn from. Because we're dealing with something here that are so much bigger than any one of us. The Green Deal is about nothing less than a rethinking of how we relate to this planet. I'm absolutely delighted that my colleague, Frans Timmermans, has agreed to come and speak today. Few people in the world has done as much as France to raise the world's ambitions for the climate and the environment. And no one can explain as well as he can what is at stake in our work on the Green Deal. Without further ado, I would like to hand over to Frans Timmermans, Executive Vice President of the European Green Deal. Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you very much, Margrethe, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak here this morning. Congratulations on organizing this conference, which I believe is very timely and extremely necessary, given the challenges we're faced with. Of course, in everybody's mind, the pandemic is now the most important thing. People fear for their health, for their loved ones, for their jobs. And even though this is what is our most pressing issue today, the support for climate action under the European population is still very, very strong. People understand that the pandemic is an urgency, but the even more profound and enduring urgency is the climate crisis and the risk of ecocide in a time when we see also the results of a profound industrial revolution combined with quickly shifting geopolitical relations. I think if well, of course, you don't really see this when you're in the middle of it, but I would argue that if we will look back in 20 years' time on this period, we will see that this is one of the most transformational periods in human history, because now the transformation is not just linked with new technologies that arrive in the world at the same time, it is also linked with, frankly, our struggle for survival. And we knew when we devised the Green Deal, and Margrethe was very, very much part of that, we knew that we needed this as a new economic model, because the old economic model would not be sustainable given the fact that our natural environment could not support us in that. But after the pandemic, we also know that this is our plan for recovery as well. And European leaders have confirmed that when they decided that 30% of all our expenditure will be on climate policy, 20% will be on digitizing our economy, two things that are intimately linked, and that all the expenditure would be spent in a way that do no significant harm to these goals we need to achieve. Now, this is where we are at the early days of what I would see as a transformational period in our history. And since we have to invest massive amount of money to recover, I think we would be relegating our duty. We would be just not looking in the right direction if we were to spend that money to restore parts of the economy that have no future. Because then you would lose that money, you would create, as they call it, locked-in assets that you will never be able to recover. But you will put an increasing burden, financial burden, on the shoulders of our children and grandchildren without anything in it for them. Because what we need to do, I mean, we have no choice. We have to make these huge investments today. This means going to the financial markets. This means incurring further debt. But that's a good investment if you use that money to transform your economy into a sustainable economy that lives in balance with our natural environment. Now, as Margrethe has said, the international circumstances in the last year have vastly improved. I remember us being criticized for being alone. You know, we're only responsible for 8 or 9% of the emissions. Why go so fast? Others will not follow. Well, others are following, partly because they like what we're doing, but mostly because they have analyzed this is in their self-interest to go into the same direction, because there is no future in the old economy and the old way of producing and consuming. So what is the rule? What is the role of competition policy in all of this? Well, first of all, let me say that we're in the middle of negotiation, very constructive negotiation with Parliament and Council on the climate law. The climate law is our law of laws. The climate law will provide the legal basis and the legal framework for the European Union towards to work towards climate neutrality in 2050 and to make sure that we reduce our emissions with at least 55% in 10 years' time. If you compare the emissions from 1990, in 2030, they should be at least 55% lower. We're still negotiating on the exact number, but that is at least the intention. Now, that should create the framework within which we can present a whole host of legislative proposals to Parliament and Council to make sure that we actually transform parts of our economy that need to be transformed. There are 3 areas which are particularly difficult to handle. This is what we concluded from our analysis. Buildings, transport, and agriculture. And we will sort of need to make an extra effort to make sure that those sectors can also tag along. For that, we will have to look, for instance, at putting a price on carbon in more sectors. The ETS has proven a very, very successful tool. Those operating with it understand it. They've gotten used to it. And I've seen the price, I think was yesterday, 38 euros per ton, which is amazing given the crisis we're in. So that's a strong and resilient instrument. And I'm sure that will be applied more and more worldwide. The Chinese are developing one. The Americans are very interested in developing it further. And it puts a price on carbon and it puts a bonus on decarbonizing. And we need to look at new sectors. We need to look at reducing free allowances to create even more discipline. And of course, we need to look at correcting at the border if our international partners do not undertake comparable commitments to comply with the Paris Agreement. We need to make sure that what we do doesn't create the risk of carbon leakage or of distorting competition to the detriment of European industry. So we will have to introduce in certain areas very surgically, very precisely, carbon border adjustment mechanisms to make sure that competition stays fair and that we don't have carbon leakage. I think this is the right way forward. Most of the industry I have been talking to, and all of us at the Commission, Margrethe and many colleagues, are always in close touch with the private sector and industry, because you don't need to be convinced, those of you in the private sector and industry anymore. Also there, the mentality has changed radically. The ask we get is give us predictability and give us long-term stability. And I think that's a fair thing to ask. And for that, you need clear competition rules that are adapted to the new realities, state aid rules that are adapted to the new realities, which means that we shouldn't be putting money public money into industries that pollute, so that do significant harm. That would be counter to what we agreed at the European Council, and we should make it easier to invest in this transformation. And this is not just a simple investment, it's an investment over long periods of time. I know that the contribution of the public sector is only a small part of what needs to be. If you look at the investment needs that will be needed in the trillions, obviously this is not something the public sector can do alone, but we can organize the right conditions for it to happen. We can mobilize public funds to put them in the right direction, and that might hopefully create also a catalyst effect for private investors. There's a lot of interest in the private sector for these investments. I think a long-term analysis shows clearly that this is where the future profits are going to be. This is where your money is safe, so that it will bring back the right returns in the future. And I believe this is something we can facilitate through competition policy and state aid rules. We also need to look, for instance, I mentioned transport earlier, that we make sure that transport reduces radically its carbon footprint. Especially we will have to look at air travel and air transport, helping that industry to convert to sustainable methods, but also reducing the use of air transport where there are very, very good alternatives. Short-haul flights should no longer be part of the future transport mix. Now that there has been put a lot of public money into saving airlines. I have understanding for this, because it is a critical industry for our future economic structure. But it can only be justified if that industry then really takes radical steps towards reducing its carbon footprint and to becoming more sustainable. Airbus is also making really promising steps in that direction, creating prototypes that could fly on hydrogen. You have promising developments in biofuels, etc. So these are also things where I believe state aid rules and competition rules can be very, very helpful. Well, I need to wrap up. My time's come to stop. I just want to say in conclusion to Margrethe and to all of you, let me end with a touch of Borgen. I knew Borgen before I knew Margrethe, but when I got to know Margrethe, I understood Borgen even better. You know that every episode of these series starts with a quote to guide the adventures of Brigitte Nuborg. Is that how I pronounce it? I think it's Nuborg, no? Okay. Anyway, it's as difficult to pronounce correctly in the Danish way as Vestager is. So there's no difference there. But anyway, most of the quotes there are rather gloomy, but there's a very nice one in season 3 by Thomas Jefferson, and I'll give you the quote. I like the dream of the future better than the history of the past. And I think this should be guiding our work. This should also help us prevent sinking into doom and gloom, because you see too much. I mean, I like nostalgia. Nostalgia is like a good wine. Drink one glass, 2, and then perhaps stop, because that's the best. Don't drink a whole bottle. You'll get drunk and you'll lose your way. And that's also with nostalgia. If we dwell too much in the past, we don't see the opportunities of the future, no matter what we're doing. We should all be very much aware in our generation that what we decide today and in the next couple of years will determine how our kids and grandkids will live 20, 30 years down the road. That is what is at stake. That is what we should be looking at. That's what we should keep our eye on. Thank you very, very much for your attention.